I'm Jen West, professional rebel of delight.
And I'm Dave Wiesdock, sage of creative scaffolding.
And this is shadow casting. Hey, Dave, it's the start of another great day. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I know we try to keep these podcasts evergreen, but I am loving the time of year right now. It's just cold and crisp outside. We got some Halloween-y backgrounds in our photos right now. I'm just loving this time of year.
Yeah, the colors are amazing. I was out in the park and it was chilly this morning. And the park that we do our bagua in has every color imaginable.
I love
It's got
that.
the reds and the blacks and the yellows and the green. Oh, so pretty. I love this time of year.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous. Yesterday, my partner and I, we were walking our dogs and we were outside and someone was burning like bonfire. So it smelled like that crisp autumn air with some smoke wafting through and everything was changing colors. I just love this time of year because it engages all the senses, your sight, your smell, taste. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Who doesn't love fall? I would like to hear from our audience. Please raise your hand if fall is one that you're like, I hate fall. Halloween, bah humbug.
Generally, it's my favorite time of the year, though, because at least in some religions like pagan Wiccan, it's Samhain time, and it's the end of one year, the beginning of another, and it kind of is represented by the season right now, where everything's starting to kind of go to sleep and rest before a new year, and it's this idea of setting new intentions.
Oh, and way to lead us into our topic of the day, Dave. I mean, you are masterful.
Just call me Master Manipulator. Wait, no, don't do that.
Master, that's his new title, Master Manipulator. Scaffolding.
Scratch that. Yeah, Master Manipulator of scaffolding.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so today, audience, we will be talking about a priority for the year. And I heard about this not too long ago, just 3 or 4 years ago. When was the first one you did? 3 years ago?
My first priority was, like 4 or 5 years ago now.
Really? Has it been that long? Wow.
Yep.
We've been doing this a long time then. It feels like yesterday to me. I was listening to, I think, a different podcast, or it popped up in a reel or something. And it was talking about the fact that most people have several priorities, and that the origin of priority is derived from the Latin prioritas, which means precedence or the first in rank. There's only supposed to be one priority. And he talked about if you picked one priority and focused on it for a year, it could have huge benefits to your life and just the way you view the world. And so I took that on and passed it on to my group and said, hey guys, let's all do a priority of the year. And so that's what we'd like to share with you, since it's getting to that chilly shutdown time.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things where it's kind of crazy to think about it. But if we have been doing this for about 4 or 5 years, that means over that time span, I've only had 4 or 5 priorities, because that is what takes over my year. I'm kind of already going back in my head and thinking before we started this practice, how I had this Enneagram 1 ENTJ, very like black and white structured energy. And so part of the anxiety that comes with that is that sometimes everything feels like a priority. Everything feels important. And so when everything feels important, nothing gets done. And then, you start to create this loop of not being able to achieve the goals that you have in your life. It's kind of contradictory to me, because you would think you would achieve more by having more priorities. But in reality, really honing in on and focusing on something that, as we'll talk about, I feel, is this concept of a priority, really helps create clarity and forward momentum in your life.
Yeah, and the way we use it really focuses it down in a way that it's not one part of your life. It's this all-encompassing energy that you can use anywhere. And I think that's what makes it really powerful, is that ability to use it in any endeavor you're doing or any environment. But before we start, this is an episode, not a quote cast, but I wanted to throw this out for the audience to kind of sit with. So here's a quote. If someone looked at how you spent your time over the last year, would what they see as your priorities match what you see as your priorities? And it's by Shane Parrish. But it's a really good question. You may have in your head priorities that you want, but is that what you're actually doing with your life? Are you living into them?
And this takes a lot of courage and bravery to answer, too, and trust, because I think that this is a great exercise that you and I kind of do now that I'm listening to that quote, don't we? I mean, I was just thinking before we were podcasting, we were already kind of talking about our past priority from this year and kind of what we were already looking at for the following year. And I feel like we kind of hold each other accountable in that way. And it gets you out of your head because you can really easily justify, well, if you're following a priority or not.
Yeah, you can make it up. In my head, I am. But yeah, if you've got somebody you're checking in with,
The
yeah,
best master manipulator is our own mind.
exactly. Yeah, it's a big thing. And when you only have one priority that you need to latch onto, it is a lot easier. So for those, this is an evergreen podcast. So we are recording it in the fall, and that's our energy for this particular one. But priorities can come at any time. I set for our group mid-October through the end of February to pick the priority. And take your time picking a priority because especially the first year, it's kind of hard. And there's a lot of prep work that helps you get into the energy. But it doesn't matter when you start your priority. It can be January 1st, the New Year, or the Chinese New Year, or my personal favorite is my birthday is when I start my priority, which is in the fall. So that's just kind of convenient. Or yeah, or some people start it for the new school year. If you're in school, then that makes sense to start your priority as the year is starting to fill out. So be open with it. When it arises in you, take it on.
Yeah. And I think to this point, again, tying this to shadow casting and how our thoughts, actions, and habits affect our behaviors, this is a really nuanced part of this, but I feel compelled to share it. One of the other things that comes to mind with priorities is this concept of, and it's a quote many of us have probably said, which is, I'll start this Monday, or I'll start this at the beginning of the week. You know, it's Tuesday of this week and Monday was literally just yesterday, but let me push it aside for another week to start it. And there's this procrastination energy in there. And so one of the gifts that comes from setting a priority and acknowledging that you can pick it at any time of the year kind of turns that on its head. It's not saying you have to wait till January 1st. You don't have to wait till school year starts, but those are opportunities that kind of align energetically with things that are already happening in your life. And so it kind of helps provide focus and guidance on what you can set for a priority. But really it's when it speaks to you, like you said. And I just really want to highlight that point. It could be June 6th or something. It doesn't really matter what day or time of the year it is. What matters is when you recognize that there is a priority you need to set in your life and you do kind of that prep work, like you brought up, to make sure that you're giving yourself the best chance of success at handling this priority. And one of the psychological ways that we can kind of connect that together is by picking a time of the year that's also important to us. So that way there's kind of this momentum already happening.
Yeah, I find that a start of something helps me a lot. Something's already going to start and it's going to be new. It feels fresh. And so then I can put that priority. And then it creates a nice pattern where you know exactly when your year started and you know you're going to do another one the next year. And what's really beautiful after you've done your first year is that you can look back. And that's what's really powerful because when you start it, there's all these expectations and all these ideas on the way you think it's going to go and how it's going to manifest. And if you hold to the priority, it'll change over the course of the year and it will change your outlook on the world. And I don't know, it's just this cool process. And by the end, when you look back, you're like, I'm different.
Yeah. It'll grow with you. You grow with it hand in hand.
Exactly. As long as you don't give up on the priority, maybe what it means to you changes, because you have more knowledge about it and more depth into what it feels like. But the priority itself does not change. It's just your relationship with it.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of talked about when or maybe opportune times to pick a priority, how do you pick a priority? What are kind of the steps for that?
So the first time I did this, I started thinking about what was on my mind and what was kind of a problem, or not really a problem, just something I was becoming aware of in my life. And the first one for me was kind of funny because I like to make things that make people uncomfortable. And so my very first priority was just one word, and it was compulsion. And so I was like, what are my compulsions in life? What are different things that I just do out of habit without paying attention? And I could have said habits or patterns, but I like compulsion because it's a little uncomfortable. So it's the idea of picking one overarching focus that'll apply to all aspects of your life, that's not going to pin you in on something. And it's something you want to focus on or become aware of and then shift. So when I picked compulsion, I was thinking, I want to start seeing the things that I normally don't pay attention to, that I just do. And then I want to decide, do I want to keep them or not? That was my overarching goal. How I reacted to people, how I did my job, how I just was with food, just everything.
Right.
Yeah. And so my favorite is one or two word priorities. So maybe you've been feeling kind of gruff or like you're not connecting with people well. So maybe you would choose something like kindness, or maybe you want to feel more abundant in life. So you say financial abundance, but then that has to apply out to your work and your relationships. Maybe it changes how much you go out to dinner or something, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I recall picking the priorities has been really sensitive to the year I just had and kind of where I thought I was going into my future year. So it really balanced between the two. One of my favorite ones was actually I did a year of adventure, which was a couple years ago. And this one was one of my favorites because I picked one word. So it was a little unsettling for me because it was very non-specific. The priority was adventure. And for me, I love to go travel, explore, check out new places, check out new restaurants, go on adventures. I love to travel. I love to just, I mean, my mom told me my first words were go, go, bye, bye. Like that is just very much my energy, right? Like if I sit around for too long, like I start to get restless. And
That's so adorable. Oh my gosh, that's so adorable.
yeah, yeah, you know,
Bye-bye.
yeah. Just imagine a little sage of creative scaffolding, just holding on to a door handle, trying to go out the door. Like I was ready. And what's funny is the year of adventure was nothing like I thought it was going to be. So we talk about these cherished outcomes, and in reflecting on that year, I definitely had cherished outcomes. I had expectations of what that adventure was going to look and be like and feel, and to some level, I think that's okay because it kind of sets the tone for what you're expecting in that energy of that year. But there also has to be this surrender of recognizing that you're not always in the driver's seat of what that priority and how that priority is going to show up. So for example, for me, that year of adventure, I moved 3 times in 1 year, one of which was into a house and learning, going through a whole house buying experience. Our daughter started going to high school. We had a lot of life changes that happened in a year, in a very short period of time. And it was an adventure because I had no control over it. There were a lot of experiences that were foreign and new to me. And so I had to learn how to adapt to a lot of lifestyle changes in a very short period of time. And really, it opened up my relationships. My partner and I, we learned how to communicate a lot more. You and I, for example, started working together a lot more intensely because the adventures were kind of driving my momentum through the year. And I was kind of feeling like the priority was very overarching. And so, it wasn't just when I set the priority, I thought the adventure was going to be, oh, I'm going to go to Europe this year or something. Like that's kind of what was in my head for an adventure. Not that I'd be moving and learning relationship challenges and communication skills and getting a new job and all these things that happened in that year. And that's another one. I got a new job that year too. So there were a lot of changes that happened in such a short period of time. And they were all adventures for different reasons.
One of the notes on this is be careful what you wish for because it will definitely take you for a ride.
Yes. So,
oh, but let me clarify because Dave and I talked about this before the podcast started, and our entire audience is like, cherished outcomes? What the hell is that? I was listening to Elizabeth Gilbert on a Tim Ferriss podcast, and she talked about when she goes into an event with her friends or in relationships that she reminds herself, I will have no cherished outcomes, meaning there's nothing specifically that I need to have happen for this to be a good day. There's no outcome that it's mandatory for me. And she said, but sometimes she would go in with the thought that she would have no cherished outcomes and then realize while she was there, she'd get irritated and realize, oh, there was an unconscious outcome that I really wanted and lesson to me. So that could be a year too. I will not have cherished outcomes. I will let the world come as it comes and I will be adaptable in that moment. So when Dave said cherished outcomes, that's what he meant.
Thanks for clarifying. I totally thought we recorded earlier.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that part with you fine people listening to this podcast.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So other ways that you can do it, it doesn't have to be one word. I find personally it makes it easier to follow through in all aspects of life. Definitely don't pick one like family, because if you make family your priority, that's going to be hard to fit into work unless your job is working with families. So in that case, maybe you'd want to pick something that makes you more connected. So you might say listening or connection, and then that can transfer into your relationships at work. It brings you closer to your immediate family or your long distance family. It can bring you more connection with yourself. So think in that sense, you need it to overarch your entire life. Otherwise, you'll feel really broken apart and stressed about it. It's just putting something in a focus.
And to add to that, if you're sitting here racking your brain and you're like, I don't know what an overarching theme is, or I'm not quite clear on how I can find something that is overarching or very pervasive in all aspects of my life, this is where this podcast can really be helpful. And not that this is a shameless plug, but it totally is. But if you've been listening to our podcast for a while, or you're a brand new listener, go back through and find some of the podcasts that you've been listening to and see what's really jumping out at you. What's really pulling your attention this year in the podcast that you've been listening to. It doesn't even have to necessarily be ours. But for example, if you're listening to a lot of podcasts right now about shadow work, for example, like what the theme of our podcast is, or you're listening to a lot of self-help podcasts, for example, maybe it's not just specific to shadow work. Maybe that's kind of where your overarching theme is sitting. Again, we are a shadow casting podcast. The goal of our podcast is to, again, celebrate our humanity, and it's to recognize the shadows that we ourselves cast. And the problem is that 99% of those are unconscious, because if we knew about them, we'd work on them. And so it's this act of uncovering our own shadows. So if there's something that's been pulling at your attention, chances are that is a shadow of an energy that you can work with as a priority for the year. For example, adventure became a priority of mine because my shadow was I was feeling isolated, trapped, confined. Normally, not a lot of people feel this way, but when you're stuck in the house because of COVID and a pandemic, which is the year prior to this, a lot of us did feel confined and trapped and isolated because we were all in our rooms isolating because of the pandemic, which made sense. But then that really propelled me into a year of adventure and wanting to go out and explore and go live life again. It was something outside of my control, but I had control of how I was feeling in that situation. And so that energy was the driving focus for me.
Yeah. A couple other ways that you can put your priority is you can put it in a mantra. not my personal favorite, but a couple that I came up with as an idea. Maybe you want to hear people better, or instead of have your own thoughts overriding what your partner's talking about. So you might put, I am listening and hearing myself and others in this moment. That can be done anywhere. You can do that with your pet. You can do it, but you're listening, and it's a practice of listening. So if a mantra is more your thing, go that way. Or I will make choices for my future prosperity and not instant gratification. So if you find you go to what makes me happy right now, maybe that's a mantra you use. And then that'll get you thinking, am I going for instant gratification or my future self? So that's another one.
And just to push back on that, just a smidge, I'd make it more active and present rather than future. So instead of I will, I just say I am.
Very
just
good. Yes.
My own spin on that, you know?
Yeah. So this is another thing to pay attention to as you're writing these things. Is it active? Is it something you can engage in now? That's a great clarification, and thank you, because I just wrote it out. And then I had one person in our group who did this really cool thing where she's an artist, but she felt like she had lost her art. And so she decided to make it this overarching energy, and she decided to see her life as art all year. And that was cool. So there are lots of ways you can frame it. Just make sure that you can fit everything in it. If you find it's a focus just on one aspect of your life, you need to find a way to open it up.
Now that we've kind of talked about how to pick a priority, where the priorities might show up, I'm sure our audience is kind of thinking, all right, so now on the reverse side of this, at least, and even for you and I, it's been a year. You just said that you kind of do yours around the fall for birthday. I do mine around Samhain, the witchy new year. So, you know, we're coming up on our year. And for the audience, how do they assess if they're living in their priority, or if their priority is coming to fruition in their lives? Like, how do they, what are the next steps for them for that?
Really, when you pick the priority, like Dave did with his adventure, you kind of have an outcome that you think's going to happen, and you have to let go of that outcome. You have to say, I'm just going to sit with this word and I'm going to watch it unfold in my life. And the main thing is just to keep it top of mind. If it lives on your fridge or on your computer desk or whatever, the bathroom mirror, anything that keeps it top of mind so that when you're going through your day, it shows up. This year, I started picking my priority based on numerology and the year I'm coming into, which is a 4-year. And so we've got this podcast and we want to just dive deeper into what it means to have a podcast. And so I need more discipline. It's not as playful as last year. And I'm like, how do I add that discipline in? But also, I'm connecting more with my femininity this year. So I'm like, oh, how do I add that in with this hard discipline will make things happen?
Yeah.
And the energy kind of unfolded into like a receptive. And I'm starting to see there are things that I want to do, and they pop into my mind. And instead of acting on them, I let them sit and simmer and just become receptive to the energy of what's going to show up. And so that's how I played with mine this year, is the 4 energy, the receptive femininity. That word's hard to say. And letting it unfold. And so it's just a practice of keeping it in your awareness as the year comes around. Do you have additions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely keeping it in your awareness throughout the year, because obviously it's a priority. It should be front of mind. Like you said in the definition, it is the single most thing on your mind. And from a cultivation space, I think that's important too. When you're cultivating this priority, it's going to make itself known. And this is why the priority is such a great exercise, because what it's, at least for me, what I feel it's bringing up is awareness and mindfulness. You are building a skill, a habit. So for example, if you haven't been to the gym for a long time, your priority might be to just be healthier, to get healthy. but there's all these machines and all these equipment and all these different things you can do. And so a lot of people burn out because they try to do strength training 3 days a week, cardio 4 days a week, and they try to work with a personal trainer and eat healthy. And they try to do all this doing and all these things that make them look productive and busy and quite honestly could help them achieve their goal. But when you try to do all of it, everything's a priority, it really can detract from your goal. So when you have all these priorities, what will really help is if you can open yourself up to the idea of just picking one thing. And so for the gym example, which is kind of a weird nuanced example, maybe you just pick that you're going to do the machines, like you're just going to focus on the arm work. That's your priority for the year, because it's not necessarily a measured outcome. Health is a very generic term. So what you need to do is you're picking something to kind of guide that focus for you. The reason I'm bringing this up is I'm putting on kind of my business hat, especially when you brought up work. And like if family is your priority, you might feel guilty for working and not being with your family. And that can feel very conflicting on the inside. And so really a great business goal is to pick something that affects your family and your work. And so one thing that came to mind and why I wanted to bring this up is time management. That is and actually that's kind of a bad priority for a few reasons, but really that could be a priority. And so it's really, you're learning to manage your time at work so that way you're more effective at your job, and you're learning to manage your time at home so that way you can be present with your partner, your kids, yourself, etc. That's kind of how one priority can be pervasive in multiple areas of your life. The reason I don't like time management is because there's a lot of icky energy around that about like trying to structure things and desired outcomes with your time management. And so that kind of defeats the purpose in my mind. So maybe you want to pick something more fun, like
being present or being in the time. And so, because time management is being focused on one thing at a time. So if you're not very good with time management, presence might be what you practice for the year, because you can do that at work. You can do it at home. You're being in the moment, doing the thing you're supposed to do. And your time will start to get managed differently. Same thing with health. So you may think, I'm going to focus on my health and then go to the gym. But as you take that abstract health, you can start to ask in all situations. You might be at the gym and be like, this is stressing me out. Then it's not helping your health. It's not. So you pull back. Maybe you don't go to the gym. You start walking. And you walk with a friend because you want company. That's health. And it's building your relationships, which is good for your health. When you're at work, is getting there extra early and staying extra late making you feel healthy? Probably not. Being more productive with your time during the normal hours of work and being present helps your health. Or communicating better with your coworkers helps your health. So it's this energy more than a doing. And you just keep asking yourself and reflecting, is this helping my health or hurting my health? Is this helping my ability to get more done in the day? Or is it stressing me out and causing me to fracture?
And that was really taking me to the point that I was trying to get to earlier. It's an embodiment. It's something that you step into being. It's not a doing. It's not, I need to, again, do weights 3 times a week and cardio 4 days a week. That's all doing. That's all distraction. The whole purpose, at least in my very humble opinion of this practice, is to build an embodiment. You are building a skill set, not for a year, but for your life. You are just picking in that year which skill set, which priority you want to focus on.
Yeah. And it's really fun if you keep it not in the doings. It's just the energy of, this feels more healthful to me, or this feels more like I'm organizing my time better. And it ebbs and flows. I mean, just like it with adventure. Dave thought he was going on a trip to Europe, but he realized he could turn all of these very stressful things, getting a new job, moving in a house, dealing with his relationship, into little mini side quests. Almost everything became an adventure, even changing his eating habits, right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And that's why, again, tying this to shadow casting, I now cast myself differently in the world around me because of these priorities. And so it's still something that is pervasive in my life even today. It's just adventure was my priority a few years ago. Now I have new priorities this year. But that doesn't mean that I ignore adventure. It's just I spent a year embodying that. And so now it's just in my life and part of what I do. And so it's almost second nature.
Yeah, it's like a mindset.
Yeah.
Maybe we can modify this podcast for next year by putting in what our priority is for the year. And then next year, when it comes around, we could say what we learned from it. So do you know what your priority is going to be, Dave?
Yes. I am going to make it surrender discipline.
Right. Excellent. And do you know how you think it's going to play out? Like, what's your focus with it?
Yeah. So there's a lot of energy around this, but really the two words have a lot of meaning to me. So surrender is the idea that I am not always in control of life, that things happen outside of the things that I can control, but I can control my reaction. I can control how I handle how I act in those situations. And that's where the discipline comes in. It's not allowing the outside influences to control my life or direct where my life is going. Now, that being said, that's very generic and it's on purpose because I see this very pervasive. So I see surrender discipline being a priority from work to relationships to my own self-growth.
Yeah. And I think this is totally cool because both of us have discipline as our hallmark for the year. Yours is surrendered, mine's receptive. So I'm taking what's coming in, playing with that energy, seeing how it unfolds. I can't wait to see what this year becomes. Hopefully we crush it, get a lot of discipline and a lot of good things done.
Did you have other things you wanted to add about your priority?
No, I think that's pretty much it for now. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but really the energy I was starting to feel as it was building was having these ideas of things I want to do and not just jumping in, letting them percolate and then seeing how they unfold and if they unfold in a bigger, more consistent way, because I've let them build and percolate and consolidate inside of me before I act on them. And the action is when the discipline comes in because it's been consolidated. It knows what it is. And now there's lots of the action and the discipline happens through that. So receptive discipline. We'll see how that unfolds for the next year.
I love that. Maybe I can't wait for a year from now for us to listen to this podcast again and for our audience to listen to it. I mean, I'm excited for the audience too. Maybe as part of this, you guys can share in the comments what you think your priority will be this year coming up. Even if it changes, that's okay. I mean, things change and grow, but throw it in the comments. Make a passive or surrendered comment and just say, hey, this is what's jumping out at me as I listen to this podcast. This is what I think my priority for the year is going to be. And then see in a year, come back to the comments and see how it's changed or how it's changed you.
And we read the comments. So if you have a question about a priority you're thinking about, send it in. We'll reply.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I'm going to close it up unless you've got anything else you want to add.
Close it up.
All right. So as always, make sure to like our podcast, subscribe wherever you're listening from, and give it a share. Give us a shout out. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time.
See ya.